Hey guys, welcome to the Session 0 or the introductory video to the Learn Game Development for Beginners in Unity tutorial series. So for this we're going to be going over 4 basic sessions which will cover the editor, the basics of C#, level creation, and building, publishing, and player settings. So through this we'll talk about just the base layer of Unity and kind of cover how to do things and make your first snapshot of a game within an hour. And it won't be a full game, like there's not going to be any player creation or anything like that, but it will kind of get you to a snapshot place where you can learn about making levels, working with colliders, rigid bodies, and terrains, and making a level. It's all very basic stuff, but it's all very easy beginner stuff that anyone can learn. So yeah, I hope you guys will enjoy the series, and if you guys have any questions, my email is here, my Discord's here, never hesitate to message me. And so yeah, see you guys in the videos.
Hello everybody, and welcome to the first session where we're going to be going over creating a new project, showing some basic hotkeys for Unity and basic layout, and then delving a little bit further into the asset store and trying to, figure out some kind of search optimization things. So when you start up Unity, it's going to bring you to the hub. And you're going to go ahead and click New. Now it might ask you to sign in. If it does, what you'll want to do is click over here. I'm not signed in right now, but it doesn't really matter right now. But so we're going to go ahead and click this, and we will go ahead and say Unity for, I probably spelled beginners wrong. We're going to go ahead and select 3D, although you can use render pipelines if you want, although I feel like those are a little bit advanced for the current climate of this one. There's also different example games that you can download and play with, although I'd recommend starting with just a blank, clean one. So we're going to go ahead and do that now. Excuse me. And yeah, it might take a couple seconds depending on how well your computer, what's the word I'm looking for here? Depending on how powerful your computer is, although usually it doesn't take too long. I haven't started Unity in a couple days, so it's going to take a little bit longer. So, a couple things about Unity. Unity uses C# as its base language. So we're going to be going a bit more into that in the next session, which will be the basics of C#. But as a baseline thing you need to know is that it uses C#, which is a C-based language, which C-based languages are object-oriented, which sounds really complex, but what all of it really means is that C# is just a language design. It's a better language for game development like this. So yeah, but so as you can see, you're gonna notice when you first launch up, you're gonna be in a situation like this. So now, if you hold down the right mouse button, you can actually look around. If you hold it down in the scene, anyways. So it's kind of, and then after that it kind of follows some basic like video game rules. If you click W, A, S, or D, it'll move you forward, left, right, down, or well, backwards, depending on the. It's all the origin point is your controller here, or scene view thing here. So, excuse me. Essentially, what you're going to do here is, wait, that was bad. Okay, so some basic things about this place is you have these windows here. You have the project folder, which might look like this. I'm going to go ahead and go to Windows to make sure mine looks like the default, because sometimes I like to change mine. Yep. So this should be how yours looks. If yours is white, and like really bright, go here to edit, preferences, and then you're going to go over here towards this general, and then this will have editor theme, and yours might look light, which I'll switch mine to light to show you. I way prefer the dark one because it just kind of makes my eyes feel better. So right here you'll notice the project folder. The project folder can be split into two sides. It's the file view or the folder view and the file view. So here you can see different files that like are just in separate folders, and in this view you can see folders. And you can navigate this one by itself. You don't actually need this at all, but you can only navigate folders to this one. So you'll notice that here it says sample zine is kind of collapsed. It kind of looks a bit weird. That's just right here. It just closes it down like that sometimes. So this is your hierarchy, and this is basically everything that's in your scene is here. So as you can see, it has the little Unity logo, and that says sample scene. And then you'll notice up here it says our project name, the scene name, and then whatever we're building for, and then our version. So this is our current scene right now we are loaded in. If we wanted to, you can double click on these folders to open them. Let's say we wanted to create a new scene. We could just go ahead and right click here, go to create, and then we could say scene, and then we could open that one, and you see now it says new scene, and if we click back it says sample scene again. But I don't want to create a new scene yet. That's for a later session. So what we're actually going to do here is we're going to go ahead and what we're going to do is we are going to, sorry, someone background kind of distracted me a little bit. But so this is where you'll see you have a couple folders here, or not folders, sorry, windows. And there's the scene view, the game view, and the asset store view. The asset store view is actually not available anymore on the asset store or on the Unity, so you'd have to click search online, which will instantly take you to the asset store, so it doesn't really matter. So some basic things you'll see here. You have the inspector. What the inspector is, it's a view of your objects here in the hierarchy. So click on the hierarchy and you'll see just all the basic stuff in here that you can edit. This is your transform. Every single object has a transform. Like you can't remove it, I don't think, because so you can't remove it. Thank you for having my phone vibrate. How wonderful. So you can't remove this because this is basically the direction where it is in the scene. It's all right here. So this is basically where it is in the 3D view, how it's rotated, and how big it is. So the scale, how big, rotation, where like how it's rotated. And then you have like things like camera icon, which is basically the camera icon in the camera script, which is basically just a huge script that gives it this bounds here. If you want to add something, click add component to it, and that's how you do that one. You have tags and layers. The layers and tags so the tags are for different things. Example, if you have an object here, let's say I create an object. I did that by right clicking and click create empty, and it's going to let me name it instantly. So if I type in player and I drag the camera under here, right, and then I want to make sure that if I have a script that is trying to find an object, I want to make sure that it differentiates these two. So this one's tag would be main camera here, but then this one's tag could be player. Because the player and the player's camera are very different things. The player might have all the scripts, while the main camera has just the camera scripts. So we want to differentiate these two. Now the layer is going to be kind of, in a sense, like if you've used Photoshop, it's similar. It's how it appears. So example is if I have a UI, the UI will be on a different layer. I believe it'll be on the UI layer right here, and so that'll it'll appear in front of everything, regardless of if it's what do you call it? If anything's in the way of it. So let's hop over to this asset store real quick and let's just kind of look at some things. If you go onto the asset store, you'll notice I have some recent searches because I go on here occasionally and try and see if anyone's done already what I'm trying to do, because it makes things a lot easier. In fact, you can go over here to templates and you can even go to click free here, and you have millions of, or I guess really it's only 200. That's surprising. So I don't listen to me, I guess, when I say millions. It has hundreds of templates you can start your game with. But if you want to go ahead and spend a couple dollars, I promise you, almost always is worth it. A great example of this is this asset here, which is a survival template. It's a very well created asset from what I've seen. But yeah, I would definitely recommend checking this out if you have some extra money and you want to make a survival game. But we're going to stick with no template for this one. But let's say you wanted to find a model, let's say you wanted to find a model of an old-fashioned radio. Right, so you look up radio in the search bar, and you'll get a bunch of them. And in fact, one of the first ones is a radio. Now, let's say that you want one that doesn't cost any money because you are trying to create a game without any budget. So click free assets, and there you go. You have a bunch of them already. And you have some really good models, too. Like, for example, this one. This one's pretty high quality, so. And it's free, too. And yeah, so other than that, though, let's say you want to go look at 3D models. You want to go for free models, and you want to try and find a character for your game. So you go over here to the categories, and you see 3D. You click on this little arrow, go down to characters, go down to humanoids, if your character's a human, and humans. And then you could find a bunch of different free ones. Some of them aren't as good, but if you go to look at the paid ones, there's a lot of them. There's a lot of them, and they're really good, high quality. See Survival Girl here, she looks great. Like, she looks like she definitely has high quality textures. But they also have these little staff picks here, which are really cool. You can click top free assets, and it'll show you the best free ones that people have rated. But yeah, so that's pretty much going to be it. It's just walking through the editor here. The next one, we're going to go ahead and talk about creating scripts and the basis of C#. But I will see you guys in that one. What is up, everyone? Today we're going to be doing session number 2, and today we're going to be going over the basics of C# and basically how to create a script, how to just kind of read a little bit of C#. We're not going to go too in-depth to it because otherwise I think we'll kind of go out of the scope of this project. So to start off, what we're going to do is we're going to go to this project folder here. And we're going to right-click, create, and we're going to select folder here. And we're going to call this folder scripts. Right, we're going to double-click on there, right-click again. Going to go to create, and right under folder, you should see C# script. Right, so we're going to just call this one test. Because I'm going to show basically what a variable is, what if statements are, update. I'm just kind of going to go basically over some of the basics here. Right, and I'm just going to do something real quick, which I think will help me keep track of time. I might edit this part out, which is fine. Let me clock here. And a minute onto here. So, alright, so basically, what we're going to do... Okay. So anyways, what we're going to do is, first of all, let's go ahead and talk about what you need to use to develop. I would personally recommend using Visual Studios, although you might have a different environment that you like to edit in. The best way to change your environment settings is by going to the edit, clicking on preference, and you can go right down to here to external tools, and then it'll say external script editor,
And you can see I have community 2019, 2022. I'm actually going to go ahead and select 2022 because I feel like it's the best one. Right, so if I now go ahead and double click on this, now that we have a script, you might want to reset your editor if you are switching to, let's say, from a text editor to a code editor. You might want to restart the editor so it can get the changes. Again, if you have any errors with it, just go ahead and shoot me an email. I can always help with at least most of this stuff. So first off, what we're going to do is we see these little two slashes here, and you might be wondering, what is this? And like, what is this code here? Because it doesn't look like code, it looks like English. So this is actually a comment. A comment, I'm going to go ahead and erase these two because we don't need these to start with yet. A comment is basically two slashes, or sometimes three slashes, depending on what you want to do. If you add three slashes in a row, it'll, or wait, is it four? Okay, apparently it doesn't want to do it. Sometimes it'll make a summary. I think it might be a Visual Studio's 2019 thing. And I think it's actually because I don't have the Unity tools installed here. So if you actually just select this, it might ask you to select a certain type of thing, and we'll go ahead and click install. Yes, and I mainly just I forgot when I switch over, you always usually want to make sure you have the proper stuff. Right. But while that's installing, we can go ahead and talk about comments. This is a comment, two slashes. Generally, you're going to want to keep adding comments to different code sections because it helps when somebody's reading your code to know exactly what's happening here. So let's say, for example, you have a different function, right? As you can see, it's going to restart here now. Shouldn't take too long, but essentially comments are just little comments that the programmer will add to it. So if somebody goes over and looks at your code because you're having an issue and you're having a peer review or something, it will, they can kind of see where you're going, where the flow of your code is going, and it's just kind of one of those nice little things. I'm actually just going to go ahead and do this real quick. Set it back to 2019 just so I can hop in the editor right now. And, oh, I guess not. That's okay. I will actually just go ahead and open this up in a script editor because, like I said, you don't actually need to open this in anything except, I mean, you can use Notepad, Notepad++. It doesn't really matter. Personally, I'd really recommend using an actual runtime editor, but because we didn't save it at the time, this is what we're left with. So this is a comment. You can see it turns green on almost every type of script editor, but so let's say I created something like a variable and I wanted to explain what it is. So for this example, we're going to use int, which is an integer, which is basically just a number that can't go into decimals. It can be negative or positive. It's just a whole number. So let's call this int. So we'll label what the type is, and then we'll label the name. We'll actually add a name to it. So let's call this integer life, or let's call it age, right? Right, and then people might get confused, and actually you usually want to use lowercase just because it's generally easier depending on what syntax you're using here. So then I'll add a comment and I'll say, this is the player's age. Right, and it's just kind of things like this that make it a little bit easier. You don't want to over-comment though. So if I say like int or float for this example, a float is a floating number that goes between numbers, so it's like an integer. It can go negative or positive, but it will it'll go between whole numbers. So it can be like 4.2 or something. So this one we're going to call health. Or again, so obviously, like, I feel like health is a pretty obvious one, so we're not going to say this is the health, right? Because that's pretty obvious. Same with this is the player's age. You generally aren't going to need stuff like that. But then let's say you have something like a double, and you want to use some weird syntax like in underscore or d underscore stamina, right? And so a double is essentially it's similar to a float, but it's smaller and only rounds up to, I believe, the first two or four decimal points, and so it just takes up less memory and overall optimizes your game. I like to use floats because they're more accurate. So when you're using time, you always want to use a float because it's going to be more accurate to actual time because it goes into milliseconds and everything. Doubles are good, but they round a little bit, so it's just not exactly perfect. But like, let's say I had D stamina, and so this is a certain type of syntax. I believe it's Hungarian syntax, and you basically what it is what you'd use the letter for. So this would be like display stamina, or again, kind of like that. And then you'd comment and you'd say display stamina double, right? And so that's just kind of stuff like that. That's kind of stuff you might want to comment on. But we're not going to be using these actually, so yeah, we're not going to be using these for the actual program we're doing here. But what we are going to be doing is we're going to create a little debug log. So first I'm going to go ahead and talk about what this is. These are basically just different libraries that we're loading into this code. And when it says public class, public is a data member that defines where it can be used. So you usually would define it before the variable. So if I said int test, right? Usually, so this wouldn't appear in the editor at all unless I say public. So this means that it can be accessed through any script without any sort of function to call it. Now, if we said private, then we would have to have something that returned the value. So we can say that, like, if we had like a function that would say public get test, and then two parentheses, and then two of these little curly brackets. This would be called what's known as a function, or you would actually need to do int here because you're returning an integer. And so you do this with any type that you might be returning. So this is a function. And so for this, I would just say return test, right? And so what would happen here is that if I wanted to call this and this was private, I could call in a different class or script, and I would be able to get the test number from this script. Although Unity, it really isn't necessary to do that unless you're into more intermediate coding, which we won't be getting into, so it doesn't really matter for that. So first what we're going to do is we're going to say public, and we're going to say string, which is going to be a string of characters. So basically just text. And we're going to say this is going to be our debug text, just like that. And then what we're going to do is we're going to write out void start, or start parentheses, and then those little things right here. And then now what we're going to say is we're going to say debug.log, and then we're going to say debug text. Make sure you add a semicolon at the end of all of these. Semicolons are the smallest things, but for some reason they seem to make the biggest problems. So now if we go ahead and save this, I will hop into Visual Studios at some point whenever it finishes downloading all the libraries. I probably should have done that beforehand, but it's okay. It kind of shows how you can translate into different environments. And I mean, I prefer to look at different development environments. So you'll notice if we go over here to this little section called the console, we aren't returned with any of these red errors. We have a warning which says that the package 20414 is available and we should download it. That's just a package manager thing, which we might get into later. So now if we go ahead and we go right click in the hierarchy and create an empty object, and we'll just call this debug, and we add the test script, we'll have this little thing that says debug text. If we go ahead and look at the console here, and we write, right, because this is the script section, and if we write testing 1, 2, 3, 4 in the debug text here, and we go ahead to our game view right here and click play. I believe I forgot to talk about that actually, which I apologize. we should get a returned message. Oh, I guess I didn't put in the start function right? What did I mess up on? Let me look at something real quick. Let me just create a new C sharp script. Oh, that's why. So I was wrong. It is actually capitalized right here. I messed up just a little bit on the syntax, and you see the error here. I mean, just not capitalizing one thing can make it so it doesn't actually do what you want it to. So now it returns testing 1, 2, 3, 4. And if I were to stop playing and I were to say hi, it would return a different message. So now you may be asking yourself, well, what is this really used for? And there is actually a lot of stuff it can be used for. So if we go ahead and go back to our preferences here and set it back to 2022, and we now open it in the section here, which now if we type in like update, there we go. So now we can actually do more coding with less work. That's why I like this environment personally, because if I were to type in like update, it gives me a description of what the update function is. Update is called every frame if the mono behavior is enabled. So then if I clicked enter, it would create that update. So one thing I like to do is I don't know where I was going with that. I'm sorry. One thing that's always good to do is to avoid using things like update, because when you use an update function, it's essentially called every single frame, and it's not as good for it. So instead, a lot of times you would want to use a fixed update, which will call it every fixed frame rate frame. So based on the frame rate and not the actual seconds. So if you have like a cutscene or something that goes for 20 seconds, but the frame rate's really low, it'll check on every frame with the frame rate rather than that. But we probably won't be working with too much with that. But let's go ahead and add a different library to this. Let's say using Unity Engine.ui. So now this is going to let us access the UI portion of the actual Unity editor. So if we go ahead and left click and then we say UI right over here and we'll say text, it's going to, if we go to our game view, add a little text box down here, which we will go ahead and press F to go to, and it should go like this, and we're going to scroll out and put this right in the middle. Right. And so we're going to go to our debug object now. And we have this debug text. And so instead what we're going to do is we're going to use a fixed update, just like that. Again, you can type it in. You don't actually need the that part. You don't need the private part. It's not required. It just makes it so it only is happening in this script rather than interfering with other updates, which it's always just best practice to make it a private void. So what we're going to do is we're going to say public, we're not going to make a string, so just to go ahead and ignore that right there. While this is a nice feature sometimes, it doesn't work this time. We're going to say public text, and we're going to say display text. So, now what we're going to do here is we're going to go into this void update here, or the fixed update, and we're going to say display text dot text equals debug text. Also, this is very predictive. That's actually really cool. I have never seen this before, so I'm guessing it's a new feature with Visual Studios 2022, but that's actually kind of cool. I might turn that off because I feel like that can get annoying at points. Also, a lot of times it'll fix your indentation. It's just kind of a quality of life thing. See, and here's where we're going to add a comment, and we're going to say sets the display text to the debug text. And now if we go back over here, let's see if we can go here, and we go back to our debug thing here, we're going to notice a new thing that says display text, and it's going to say none text. So we're going to go over here to our text box right here and drag this right into there. And so now if we go ahead and click play, you're going to notice something kind of cool. It's going to change to what our debug text is. And you'll notice if we change it to hello, how is your day? It's going to actively change it while we're changing it in here, which I always like to do. It's always nice, but that's how you can do things with like sliders to make health and all sorts of things like that. So you may be asking yourself though, what is the debug log used for that we just used a minute ago? And I realized what I forgot to talk about right there. So debug.log. Okay, let's just say that we want to debug log the display text, or not the display text. You want to debug log the debug text. So let's say you have a function here, because this is a function right here. So let's say you have this function, and you want to return an error code if it fails. So to show you kind of a bit more what that is, so I'm going to show you what's known as Boolean logic and if statements. So if you go over here to this update here, and we were to say if, and we said display text, or actually no, if 1, and we're actually going to go ahead and add 2 more parentheses right here. So we have 1 parenthesis, 2 parentheses. We're going to say if 1 plus 5 times 2 equals 0, return, and then we're oh, we can't do this actually because this is a void. So this is a void function, which means that it won't have a return type. A return type just means that it's a variable that it can return a variable like name or number. So if it's an int type, so we'll go ahead and do that kind of as a cool thing here. So we're going to say int, and we'll call this test function, and then we're going to put it like that. First of all, it's going to ask you, it's going to say, hey, there's no return statement in here. It says not all code paths return a value, and so it's kind of going to be a bit confused here. So first, what we're going to do is we're going to paste in what we typed in earlier. And so if it equals 0, then it should return 3201, right? Okay, and yeah, so it's going to tell us that this is unreachable because it knows for a fact that this is a false statement, right? Because it's actually going to equal 12. So we're going to go ahead and say else, just like that, with the 2 square brackets, and else if, and then we'll say 1 plus 5 times 2, in parentheses, which I forgot to add right there, equals 12, return 1. Okay, and so now you're gonna notice it says it's still gonna not gonna do it. It's because we're not actually calling this function. So we're gonna say test function here, just like that, parentheses, and then we're going to add a semicolon. And now what's happening here? Oh, so we actually do need to add an accessibility part to it. So this is a public function, and what's happening here? Unreachable code. I don't care. What's happening here? Return 0. Just in case. So it should, oh wait, it's because that's going to be 11, right? So it's kind of a bit of it's kind of a bit of a test here to check our computer to see if it's running correctly, right? So if it equals 11, then return 1. Otherwise, So I'm going to go ahead and say int x equals, and we don't need to label it as public or private, and we can declare it here because we're never going to use it again. And then we're going to say debug.log, and then I'm going to say code oops, code plus, oh, does that have a thing there? Plus x. And so that'll make sure I'm at a semicolon. So what this is going to do, a colon right there, is going to debug and it's going to say code and then it's going to add on the x to the debug log. So now, obviously, this is never actually going to happen. So what's going to happen now is we're going to return our thing here and then it's going to return code 1. The reason it does that is because after changing our text here, keeping our text updated, it's actually running this every single frame, which is a whole other problem, but we're not going to really worry about that because it's not too big of a thing that really matters for this beginner tutorial. But essentially, some of the main parts about this is if statements. This is Boolean logic. Essentially, what it's doing is it's creating this nice little return type called a bool or variable type. So it's saying bool, and then it's going to say like 0x some memory address. And then it's checking if 1 plus 5 plus 2 is equals to 0, and if it is not, it's returning 0 or 1. 0 equals false, 1 equals true. So instead of actually writing this, I'm just going to say. So this is a memory address. It'll be 0x something or 1x something, and because it knows that this is false, it's going to return false. But then it's going to say, okay, this didn't work, so now we're going to say else, and it's going to run the else statement. If 1 plus 5 times 2 equals 11, then return 1. Right, so like let's say I change this to 112 and I change this to 11. So now what would happen is if we ran this code again, instead of getting code, actually it already ran that because that, but instead of getting code 1, we get code 3201. The problem, however, is if we turn off collapse, you'll notice that it's actually an infinite loop. And pretty much an easy way to do that, to fix that, is to add a detection. So example would be like if you were to add a trigger sensor or an event sensor and then trigger that code later on. So example, we would put this actually here. And what we could do is we could say, oops, okay, so okay, so what we could do now is we could say public void button click. Right, and then I'm going to go ahead and say this. And I'm going to add this code right here. And so this is a new function that we've created here, which will be nice and fine. So we have this new function here now. And we're going to go back to our UI. It looks like we have an issue. Okay, so now we actually have a bit of a problem. We don't actually have so we're going to have an error here, and it's going to say name X doesn't exist in current context. That's fine. We're going to fix it in just a second. We're going to click UI. We're going to make a button. We're going to click right here. You can change the button text to say click me or whatever you want to make it say. And then we're going to add an onClick method right here. If you scroll down here, so if you open this, I kind of glossed over that, I apologize. But if you open up the button here, the text is right here, and you could just change it however you want. The button is right here, and you can click on click here. Although if you click off and don't add anything, sometimes it deletes itself. So now let's go ahead and address this error here. So we don't actually have, X doesn't exist in this code because it doesn't know what it is. So what we're going to do instead is add a parameter function essentially saying label this as this. So where's the int X? And now we add this parameter. So this is actually and because we don't have anything that's saying this is no. So we don't have X though. Oops. Go ahead and move here is that where's X equals that. Oh, that's not a local variable. So instead now we have here is int X equals 0 and then X equal. So okay. So we're going to say x equals test function forward passing through x, right? So now it's going to go use test function. So we're going to value of this in here. It's going to run through this code, and then depending on what it actually says, will be what it returns. So this time we go ahead and type that over. This should all go away. And then if we click our debug object, and we go through here and go to null function, click test, and click button click, and we click play, and click the button, it doesn't return. Why is that? Why is that? So we have int x, and it's just we're trying to pass through a local variable, and it doesn't exactly like that. Let's go ahead. What if we say int y? We say y equals this. It doesn't like that, does it? Let's say let's. Why is that? How do I skip? That's not very nice. Okay, that's fine. No, okay, so that's just parameters. So we're going to classes, you can pass things like that. But for the sake of just this time, we'll just use int x up here, and then we will say x function, we'll say x, just like that. It'll pass through and find out it's a function already here. And we could technically just use this like this. I'm not going to say y, just because that makes it nicer and it's easy. Right, so now we have multiple variables. So int y, and then we're going to say y equals. Or say, we don't even need the y equals, do we? Oh, that might actually be why that was breaking, which is fine. We don't need to actually. That doesn't actually really matter. Oh, okay. I see why it was happening here. So this is actually supposed to be here. That's what was messing up, is because this is actually unreachable because it will return it. So if we go ahead and undo that, that was just a little mistake I noted. I just didn't realize. So if we have it set to x, we have it set to x here. We don't actually need to do this like this. We just need to put this right here. Let me say x equals 0 or whatever. Right. So now we should be able to actually return this. So let's go ahead and try that now, because that one might work a little bit better. Right. So now it's going to run code 0 because it's not actually getting a value back from here. Which means that what's happening is it doesn't actually like this. So I guess I was right in the end. So we're just going to go ahead and say int x right here. Or, yeah, back to this. Back to z. And then y or something. And then x equals... Oh, what just happened there? X equals test function, or z equals, and then we'll have to just put z there. But I don't even think we actually need that. We don't need that. Just ignore that. We'll just go ahead and say that int z equals test function. So what's going to happen is it's going to say z equals this. We're going to run this if statement now, and then debug log code plus whatever this returned as. So now if we go ahead and rerun here, what should happen if we click this is we should get code 3201, and now we're not getting a million different types here. So now instead of getting 1,000 a second, we're gonna get 1, 2, 3 every time we click. We're gonna get 1 every time we click. But that is going to be just basically all the really easy, simple basics to it. I messed up a little bit on a couple parts, but I'll probably, honestly, kind of edit a little bit of parts out there, or just kind of shorten them. But that's going to be basically all of the really simple parts of coding. There's definitely a lot more. The Unity has a very good library that you can brush up on. But that's going to be it for today. Hope you all enjoyed, and if you did, make sure to watch the next one. What's up, everybody? Today we're going to be talking about level design inside of Unity. So to start us off, what we're going to talk about is materials. So what we're going to do for the first part is go ahead and right-click in the project folder, create folder. We're going to call this folder materials. Right. So now we're going to go ahead and click into this material folder. We're going to right-click again, create. We're going to go down here to where it says material. And then we're going to call this one grass or something. So what we're going to do first is we're going to go ahead and right click here, click on 3D object, click on cube, and then we're going to, while we're in our editor, click F to bring us to the cube. So if you press R, it's going to bring up the scaling tool, which you can go ahead and click on one of these little bars here and expand it, and then make it shorter, however you want to do it. And then W will be the transform, it'll let you move it around. E is rotation, R is scale, and then I believe T is the rectangle, and then Y is all of them except for the rectangle tool. I find the rectangle tool easy to work with the squares, so I'll use that right now. If you click on this grass material, first what you'll notice is it's just white. It's just a white material. Nothing very special about it. Now if we drag this onto here, you'll notice no changes. Now if we drag the smoothness up or down, you'll notice slight changes in the material there, or the metallic and smoothness, and now you'll notice very big changes, right? So let's go ahead and drop both of these. And what we're going to do is click this little white square here, which is going to be our color changer. And we're going to drag it over to green, and then drag this to wherever you want to make it look. So I'm going to grab the player here, because the player in reality is just a camera. So if we go ahead and set the position to 0, 0, 0, and then bring them over here, wherever they are. Another thing you can do is you can click the main camera here, and you could just say, or the player here, and you could just say Control Shift F, and it'll bring it instantly to where you're looking at. And then I'll just go ahead and set the rotation back to 0, 0, 0. So now our player camera is actually here, and they can see everything. So with the basic Unity layout, you can actually create lots of different types of 3D objects. You can create spheres, capsules, cylinders, planes, quads, terrains, and you can start making trees. So the tree system is a little complicated, so I'm not going to actually get into it in this video, just because it is a lot more complicated than I'd like to discuss with the time limit we have here. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a sphere, drag it up, and then I'm going to create a cube and drag it up, and then I'm going to go over here to the right part, and I'm going to add component, and I'm going to search up rigid body. And now I'm just going to play the game, and we're going to watch what happens. So you'll notice that it actually fell down. This is due to the rigid body we just added. Rigid bodies essentially add gravity to your game. So you see it'll fall down, and if I move this up or down, it'll actually interact with it. You'll notice if I drag it down, I can actually, if I change this stuff, then it should, 0 angular drag, it should there we go. Now see, it can roll around a little bit more. So that's basically just what a rigid body is. It adds gravity to it. If we click on our grass texture here and we press Control and D together, it'll actually duplicate it. And then we can call this like concrete or something, right? And let's make this color here gray. And we'll go ahead and add this texture to those two things. Now we have a bit of a contrast here. Well, like let's say you wanted to have 2, maybe even 3. So now if we drop them all, they'll all kind of roll around everywhere, and they're kind of like little boulders, which I think is kind of cool. So let's go ahead and drag some of these around here. And this is kind of what you can do with level design here. You can just use cubes and spheres if you want, although I'd recommend not doing that because it's not very good. What you can do ever is go to the asset store and click 3D models or 2D, whatever you're planning on using. Click free assets, and you can find a million different free types of things that you can use to make your maps. You can use RPG Polypack, stuff like that. But I'm not going to be talking about that. I'm going to be talking just about kind of what Unity offers by itself in a bare bones kind of thing. So what we're actually going to do is just kind of delete all this here, just because that's just kind of a show. Actually, you know what? I'm actually going to say keep it, because we're going to do something kind of cool. Right click, 3D object, and you're going to select terrain this time. And so it's going to be blue for a second, but just ignore that. What we're going to do is we're going to drag it up right next to here. Or actually, we're going to drag it a little bit down, and what I want to do is we're going to click over here in the terrain. We're going to go over here to this paintbrush. We're going to go over here to set height. We're going to say like 3. We're going to say flat and all. Nope, 15, flat and all. Maybe a little bit more, flat and all. And now I believe I can actually go down in height. No, why is it not letting me set the height here? Local, flat and all. No, there we go. So instead what I'm going to do is I'm going to say 15 or maybe 3, flat and all. So now we have a little bit of a plane here. But now what you'll notice is what we can do is if we go over here to this paintbrush again, click raise or lower terrain. In this, you'll notice that we have a little brush here. But if we hold the right click, it's going to actually make little indents into the terrain. I prefer to use stuff like these kinds of shaders right here and set the opacity fairly low and then scroll out and just kind of, drag in kind of here like this. Just kind of do it a little bit lightly and you get these nice kind of rolling hills type looks. So let's say you just want to kind of like, do this. Just like that. And let's say you wanted to add a little bit more squarishness to it. What you'd want to do is you would want to lower the opacity kind of low and you just kind of like drag it around really quickly like this. And that kind of gives it a little bit more of a squarey feel. And then you'll go over here to this here and you'll say smooth height and you'll select all of it and you'll just kind of slowly smooth it a little bit. Make sure the opacity is kind of low. And so now we get these nice semi-smoothish rolling hills in a way. And you'll notice that it's all white texture, and what you'll need to do to change that is actually go ahead and go online and get a texture, which I think what we'll do is if we just go over here, we can just look up grass texture, right? Go to images, and we'll actually look up seamless. This is the best way to get actual okay textures. And you'll see like things like this. And we'll click on the website just to make sure there's no copyright issues. So this is fine. We're allowed to use this. There's nothing saying that we can't use it. So we'll go ahead and download it and then just grab it right here and drag it straight into Unity. And we'll go ahead and create a new folder, kind of like how we did before. And for this one, we'll call it textures. Nope, call that textures, not folder. And we'll drag this in here. So now what we're going to do really quick is if you hold down the view key, by the way, and scroll, you can actually change the speed of how fast you go like this. It's very helpful. It wasn't a feature in old Unity, and it is now. It's so helpful. But what you can do is if you go over here to textures and you just drag on the grass texture, and you go back to the materials folder, it'll actually make a new material. So you don't have to do anything. Now what you'll want to do to obviously make it look better is to drag down all that, maybe darken it a little bit with color. And then this thing here is the tiling, and this is going to be what makes it look better. So if I put 5 to 5, it'll make it look smaller. And because it's seamless, it won't have seams like that. So you'll notice, like, if I go ahead and do that, you'll notice it's kind of clipping here. And what you'd want to do when it clips like that is click F on a small object, and it'll make it so you can get closer to things like this. But when you have it like here and you go down to these small sections, it is a lot harder to see as it makes the clipping planes a lot smaller. So now we have this little texture thing here, but we notice we don't have any texture on the actual terrain, which is not very fun. So what we'll do is we'll go over to this paintbrush. We're going to click on whatever it says right here, and we're going to click paint texture. Now you'll notice there's nothing here. So what we'll need to do is we'll need to add a terrain layer. So we'll click edit terrain layers. We don't have any created, so we'll click create. We're going to select this, double click, and now everything looks green. Now obviously that's a little too bright for our liking. So what we'll do is we'll grab this. Oh, not that. Maybe that. We can change the metallic thing to it, but it's gonna kind of make it a little wonky. So instead, what I recommend doing is setting this to be a bit bigger. Maybe not. I think that's actually a solid amount. And maybe adding like a secondary map to it to kind of give it a bit more of a dark feel. Nope, I guess not. So instead what we'll do is we'll increase the smoothness, or we'll increase the metallicness, which will give it a bit more of a dark feel. Maybe not by too much, just so it doesn't look shiny. But then now we have a texture on our grass here. And you'll see the main difference between having a terrain and a cube is a terrain can actively change what it looks like this. So you'll also notice that now that we have texture, it looks a little clumpy. So if we go ahead and smooth it out now, it'll look a little bit better. But one of the main differences with it is that with terrain, you can make it look however you want. For example, if I wanted to throw a mountain in the middle here, I just go ahead and say raise or lower terrain. And right, because you can do that with terrain. It's just like whatever you want. But with cubes and stuff and making them out of that, go ahead and smooth it now. See, and now boom, now we have a little bit of a mountain. Which it doesn't look good because we don't have any textures. We haven't detailed it or anything, but no models or anything, so it doesn't look good. But I mean, it's there. It's a little bitty mountain. And if we click let's say we added a new terrain texture, which I'll just do this grid texture here for now, but we could do the same exact thing, except now we would select our brush size and our brush type, lower it depending on how low we want to do it, and now we would paint just like that. So you can just paint it like that. It's like, let's say I want to add a little bit of color to my mountain here. Right, I would just do this. And it works because I can just paint it however I want. And I can change the texture on it. I could even, if I wanted to, let's say, blend a texture, I could lower the opacity here, click on the grass, and then click on this, and like you can see, it slowly starts to fade them between each other. And that's really good map making skills, actually, is knowing exactly how to fade. And so now, like, you can see it just has like little spots that are white instead of like little grid marks here. So you can't even tell it's a grid, it just looks like it's a little bit brighter of grass. And so it's just small things like that that are kind of, cool. But essentially, that's kind of the basics of level design in Unity. I mean, you got like little shapes you can add. There's even like there's packages you can add for like making your own shapes, which I think is really cool, but that's a little above the project scope we're going for here. But yeah, so that's basically going to be all for this session. I hope you all did enjoy this one. And yeah, make sure to stay tuned for the next one. Hey everybody, today we're going to be doing the last session in this short tutorial series on basically making your first video game snapshot, and just beginning the developing tires rolling, So what we're going to be talking about today is just a couple of things that I forgot to speak about in my last episode, but also some new things, which will be the project settings, which will be shown to you in a minute. I forgot to change a couple things, I think, but it's okay. Let's change the build settings and delete that one. Sorry. So I actually recorded this before and happened to do this very smart thing and not turn my mic on, so we're going to hope that it doesn't turn out badly this time. So what we're going to do first is I'm going to show you, that shouldn't be there yet, basically reflections and some material adjustments, and just some kind of cool things that are actually, I find really cool personally. So our first thing is going to be, first of all, you can edit materials right here. Ignore that. You can edit materials right here is the first thing that we're going to change, and there's a bunch of different like shader types you can use, and you can click legacy, diffuse, or whatever you want, but we're going to stick with standard for this because it's pretty basic. But one thing I'm going to do that's kind of cool is if we drag the metallic up all the way and then the smoothness all the way up, it'll add a nice crystal clear reflection. And so now one other thing though that's a problem with this though is that obviously there's no actual reflection there, which is, kind of bad if you want a reflection in your game. But so I'm going to show you kind of one other thing you can do with this material and that'll make it like hazy in a way. So if we go ahead and we click on our rendering mode and click fade and click on our color and go to our alpha, that's what A stands for, and set it to like medium. We can do the same here even. We set our alpha to like a medium size one. So now we'll notice that if we click play, A, these are kind of like more glassy, this one here, and B, this has like a big reflection here, like. So what we're going to do now is we're going to do something called adding a reflection probe. So if we click on add component here and we click reflection probe, you're going to notice the entire world's going to go a bit darker for a minute. And also this will become fully black, which can be a little confusing. So for this showcase, I'm going to go ahead and turn this off, which is gizmos. You can just click there and it turns off all the visibility of those things. So I'm going to click there now, and you're going to notice that it's a little bit, I don't know why it's showing me that. So it's a little awkward, right? It's kind of like, you know, it's if you go into your game mode, there's no actual reflection here. It's kind of like, oh, well, why is that happening? So there's three types of reflection probes you can do, which is baked, custom, and real time. Real time is my favorite because it actually shows you the real time shadow here. So if we go ahead and turn gizmos off now, now you can see that it actually has a reflection. Now, if you play it though, one thing you're going to notice if I click play here, the reflection is actually going to stay in one spot regardless of if I move this. So like you can see I'll move this and it's still staying in the same place on there. And so that's kind of a bit confusing. Why is it doing that? Great question. Well, it's because we're not updating it. So what we can do is we can click here and say the refresh mode needs to be via scripting or on every frame. We're going to click on every frame. That's not great for performance. We're also going to turn HDR off because we don't need it on right now. It's just going to take away a lot of performance. So now if we click play though, you'll notice that the actual reflections will update with this. So if I move this, it'll actually move around it, and if I kick it, you know, move it around, it won't, like, it'll go away and it'll change and it'll be all nice and perfect. So we have a bit of a reflection there. But you'll notice that it won't show the same for these two just because they don't have a reflection probe. But if I were to add one to this box, another reflection probe, say it was in real time, updated every frame, and wasn't HDR, now you would see now that they have reflections. So you can actually have a reflection without having a reflection probe on it. If we go ahead and increase the smoothness on this and the metallic feature to it, it will also get a reflection. And because it's inside of the bounds of another reflection probe, it actually will change. Because it already has this reflection script. And if you click on this box projection thing, or not, you need that, you'll see that it's in the square, so it still keeps it. And you'll also notice that when we interact with other reflection probes, it kind of makes it look a bit weird. But that's okay. That's kind of a bit more of an advanced thing that people aren't really going to notice for a snapshot. But now we have like cool reflections in the game, which I find awesome. So now what we're going to talk about is build settings. Why is Minecraft open? So what we need to do is build our game to kind of get an actual test for it. So first what we're going to do is we're going to click File and then Build Settings. And you'll notice there's not going to be anything in here. If you go to your scenes folder, you can grab whatever scene you want, drag it in there, and it's going to keep the scene there. So, or if you have yours open, you can click Add Open Scenes. So this number right here does matter if you're coding, like, let's say a level transport or anything like that. The scene order is very important. So what we're going to do now, though, is we're going to click Player Settings here. It's going to open up this box, and we're going to drag it right here. We're going to click on here. We're going to maximize it. So I'm going to put UD Tutorials right here where it says company name. You can put whatever you want your company name to be, and I'll put 0.01 or V0.01. Now we can select an icon. For this one, we're just going to select this little knob here. And you can make a cursor too. Otherwise, if you don't want a cursor, you'd have to disable that in your camera. But if you just want the default cursor, it'll use the default Windows cursor. Otherwise, you can click select and use, for example, a check mark. Now, every time you hover over your game, inside the game, your cursor will turn to a check mark. And you can change the hotspot if you're image is wonky or anything. But if we click on icon, it'll show you kind of how the icon will look on different resolutions. So 16 by 16, and then 1024 to 1024. It shows you all of them. If you don't want that, if you want to have specific icons for specific resolutions, you click override, and it'll let you pick depending on their resolution for their icons. I prefer not to have that on. I prefer to just use it how it goes. But now let's say you wanted to add a splash screen to your game. Well, for that, all you would need to do is we're going to maximize this. Actually, we're just going to do this. We're going to scroll over like that, make that a bigger viewport for us. And so you might ask yourself, well, how do I add a splash screen? Right? How do I add my company's logo to it? Well, if you go to this section right here, splash image, and it says splash screen, you can't actually take off show splash screen or show Unity logo unless you purchase Unity. Now, if you click preview, it's going to show the Unity logo. And you can change how it looks, dark on light, light on dark. I prefer light on dark. And you can go down here to background color and set it to black. That's how I prefer it to look because I think it looks really pretty like that. And so if you want to add your own logo, you just go over here to this and you say plus, and then you put your logo in here. Now the problem with that though is that it's going to appear over the Unity logo. So what you can do to combat that now is click right here, it says Unity logo below, and select all sequential. Now you can even select how long you want each logo to show up. For example, if I wanted to show my logo for 10 seconds, it would go Unity, then this logo for 10 seconds. Obviously, I don't want to sit there for 10 seconds and watch my logo. So what I'm going to do is, first of all, drag your logo in front of the Made with Unity. Made with Unity should always be last after everything, after all, publisher, whatever. Click preview. So now 2 seconds, 2 seconds. So now you have your splash screen there. So now comes the most important and fun thing. First of all, you don't want to mess really with this or this. This is all kind of stuff that you just kind of want to stay away from unless you know what you're doing. Otherwise, it can get messy. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to scene here. Or not scene, sorry. We're going to go ahead and shrink that. Go to File, Build Settings, Build and Run. It's going to ask you to find a place to build it. I usually go ahead and make a new folder inside of my project folder. Not in the assets folder, but in the actual project folder. And I call it Builds. And I'll select folder there. And it will start to build my game. This one might take a little bit less time, but average for most people, it's going to take anywhere between 30 seconds and 20 minutes. For such a small game, it's probably going to take right there, a couple minutes, not a couple seconds. But as you see, now we have our snapshot here of our game, and it didn't load in our cursor, which is kind of weird, but I guess it's okay. We have our rigid bodies here, and we have our little mountain range here, and all this stuff. But yeah, so I mean, that's pretty much all we need to go over, other than I actually just remembered we do need to talk about one more thing, which is publishing your game. I would personally never recommend publishing a game like this because this is way underdone, this is way underfinished, and you'll get made fun of on any itch.io or GameJolt. But the main thing that comes into play is where do you put your game, right? So there's a million places, like itch.io is a really good one that most people tend to go to. It's really good. It has devlogs, it has games, and there's no really big fees. Another one is GameJolt. GameJolt's really good. They are made for games, while itch.io has more game assets and stuff. They're all really good though. For even Google Play, you can do apps. You can do Apple, itch.io, GameJolt, whichever one you want to go to. They're both very good, and they both will help you publish your game. Maybe not publish it, but they'll help you have a platform to put it out there. But anyways, guys, I believe that will actually be the end of this session, or series in general, actually. I hope you all do enjoy, and hope you all did enjoy it. And yeah, make sure to stay tuned for the next one.